Well, good morning and welcome back to Kids Zone. I am so glad that you guys are here with me today. This week, we are focusing on another Old Testament prophet named Jonah. This may be a story that you've heard before. Now, it kind of goes like this. God had a job for Jonah, but Jonah didn't even want it. Go to Nineveh, God said, and tell your very worst enemies that I love them. Jonah refused. No, those are bad people doing bad things. You cannot send me there. Send me anywhere else. Exactly, God said to him. They have run far away from me, but I cannot stop loving them. I will give them a new start. I will forgive them. No, Jonah said, they do not deserve it. So Jonah made a plan. He decided, I'll run away. Far away, so far away that God won't be able to find me, and then I won't have to do what God says. I think that's the best plan. Because as far as he knew, it was a good plan. But of course, it wasn't a good plan at all. It was actually a really silly plan. Because you can try to run away from God, but he loves you so much, he will always come and find you to be with you. Jonah went ahead with his not very good plan. He went and he ordered a ticket to anywhere but Nineveh, and he boarded a boat sailing in the complete opposite direction. Well, it wasn't long being on that boat with all the sailors and the crew that a fierce wind blew and came out of nowhere, and the boat started to lurch and pitch and roll, and everyone on the boat started turning green and seasick. Jonah sat upright in his bed immediately. The first thing that went wrong with Jonah's not very good plan was that God sent this big storm after him. The sailors couldn't sail their ship properly. We're sinking, they yelled as they started throwing things overboard to try to keep the ship afloat. Clothes and food, whatever they could find. And by now, Jonah knew that the storm was his fault. Throw me overboard instead, he told the sailors, and the storm will stop, I promise you. The sailors weren't sure. They didn't want to risk it by throwing Jonah overboard, but Jonah insisted, it is the only way you can be saved. Jonah knew that God was trying to get his attention and talk to him. And so, overboard they threw him. No sooner had Jonah hit the water than the waves grew calm and still, and the wind died down, and the storm stopped. Just then, when Jonah thought it was all over, he was sure he wouldn't drown. God sent a big fish to rescue him. Well, the fish ended up swallowing Jonah whole. Jonah must have thought he died. Certainly, it was so dark, like a tomb. He smelled the rotting food and the slimy seaweed, and he knew he wasn't dead. He was in the belly of this fish. Sitting there in the darkness for 3 whole days, Jonah had plenty of time to think. Pretty soon he realized his plan was a very silly plan indeed. He was sorry for running from God, and he prayed from the belly of that fish for God's forgiveness. After 3 days, the fish spat Jonah safely out onto dry land, and then Jonah heard somebody calling his name. Go to Nineveh, Jonah, God said. And this time Jonah agreed, and he said yes. He went straight to Nineveh and told everyone God's message. Even though you've run far from God, he can't stop loving you. Run to him so he can forgive you. Remember, God is always trying to find ways to tell us, I love you, I am with you, you don't have to be afraid, you can come home to me. The people of Nineveh listened to Jonah and they started loving God, something they'd never done before. They learned to do what God had said and stopped running away from him. Many years later, God was going to send another messenger with the same beautiful message. Like Jonah, Jesus would spend 3 days in utter darkness in the tomb. But this messenger, Jesus, would be God's own son. He would be called the Word because he himself would be God's message. God's message translated into our own language. Everything God wanted to say to the whole world, all wrapped up in one person, Jesus. Well, you guys take some time with the discussion questions today, and I'll see you next week.